Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Our Beloved Kin, A New History of King Philip's War, by Lisa Brooks, narrated by Rainey Fields. The first step in liquidating a people is to erase its memory, destroy its books, its culture, its history. Then have somebody write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. The world around it will forget even faster. Milan Kundera, The Book of Laughter and Forgetting. Pilikisos, The New Moon. Pildowi Onsmong Wongon, A New History. Joseph Laurent, New Familiar Abenaki and English Dialogues. Introduction. The Absence of Presence. As the first leaves of sassafras and strawberry emerged in the Wampanoag country during the spring of 1623, a leader stepped forth to confront Plymouth colonist Edward Winslow and the Wampanoag diplomat Hobbamoak as they entered the Pocasset town of Mattapoisett on the banks of the Titicut or Tanton River. All were preoccupied with the illness that had overcome a beloved man, Usamiquin, or Massasoit, his title, a great Sogam of the Wampanoags, and leader of the adjacent region of Pokanoket. Hundreds gathered at Usamiquin's council house, and both Hobbamoak and Winslow were en route to pay their respects, a commendable indigenous custom in this land, as Winslow noted in Good News from New England. This Pocasset leader, however, had remained at Mattapoisett, perhaps to begin cultivating the fields, process the spring fish, or look after children and elders who required care. A gunshot had sounded beyond the river just prior to Winslow's arrival, putting the leader on edge, prepared to defend those kin who also remained. From the well-worn path ahead, the leader may have heard heavy English boots or Hobbamoak's voice, lamenting and singing Usamiquin's praises. Winslow later reported that a rumor had circulated that Usamiquin had already passed away. Indeed, their diversion to Mattapoisett was in part necessitated by his concern that the Sogam of this town, a man who held a much more suspicious view of the English settlers who had so recently planted on the Wampanoag coast, would succeed Usamiquin. Upon entering Mattapoisett, Winslow approached the great Sagamokomoko, the council house where leaders deliberated, where the Sogam and his family lived and hosted guests. However, he quickly discovered that Conbitant, the Salcom, was not at home, but at Pokanoket, tending to Usamiquin and his kin. Instead, Winslow remarked he was greeted and given friendly entertainment by the Swa Salcom, translating to an audience in England, for so they called the Salcom's wife. This was his mistranslation. Sonksquaw, or Sogam squaw, was not simply the word for spouse, but rather the word for female leader, suggesting that this woman who entertained him was perhaps more than Conbitant's wife, particularly given that by local custom she would have come from a leadership family. The Sonksquaw must have carried a legitimate suspicion of this English newcomer who, by his own account, had raised a gun at her and her family during the previous year's spring gathering at Nipmuc, a neighboring Wampanoag town, acting rashly on false rumors that Conbitant had killed Plymouth's interpreter, Tisquantum. Indeed, that spring, on the return journey home from Pokanoket, Conbitant would raise this encounter when Winslow assured him of Plymouth's good intentions, asking, "If your love is so great and it grows such good fruits, why is it that when you come to our places or we go to yours, you stand as if ready to fight, with the mouths of your gun pointed at us?" Yet despite the gun Winslow carried, the Sonksquaw responded to his arrival with diplomacy. She hosted Winslow and his small party, offering hospitality, food, and rest, as well as assistance and information. When she allowed Winslow to hire one of her runners to seek news from Pokanoket of Usamiquin's status, Perhaps this impulse arose in part from her awareness of the danger of rumors in Winslow's hands, but it also arose from her responsibility as a leader, a choice she made about how to deal with this stranger in her space. Her response was emblematic of the ways in which Native leaders often acted as diplomatic hosts to unexpected European guests. Indeed, 2 years before, the Wabanaki leader, Samoset of Pemaquid, far up the coast, had greeted the startled newcomers at Patuxet, or Plymouth, in their language, saying, "Welcome, Englishmen." This reflected not only Indigenous diplomacy, but experience with over 100 years of trade, cultural, and linguistic exchange, as well as violence, disease, and captivity with Englishmen and other Western Europeans on the coast. Indeed, Samoset was one of many Wabanaki and Wampanoag men who had been captured by European explorers, learning a new language by necessity, and in his case, returning to serve as an intercultural diplomat. This exchange was not new to the Wampanoags or Wabanakis, who also had been traveling by canoe to exchange with each other for millennia. What was new about this encounter was that these Englishmen had come to stay, marking a discernible move from extractive colonialism, including the harvesting of trees and fish and the capture of indigenous bodies, to settler colonialism. These newcomers also carried a vision that Englishmen would replace the indigenous people, including women planters, as the rightful inhabitants of this land. Winslow's is the only account of this important woman in the Puritan narratives. She was a leader, the wife of combatant, and a relation to many. She experienced the arrival of the newcomers and their incorporation into native networks of exchange and diplomacy. She hosted Winslow and other leaders at her large home. Like other women, she cultivated and sustained the fields that fed the families. She felt the dire impacts of the diseases that ravaged her relations. Living through the epidemics and the first wave of colonization, she experienced unimaginable grief and loss. Yet she birthed and raised at least 2 daughters, Weetamoo, or Namampum, and Wutanakanoosk, who survived several epidemics as well as threats of violence to mature into leaders among their communities. Yet in Winslow's account, the significant mother and leader was not even named. Although well remembered within native New England communities, like her mother, Weetamoo has often not been named in the histories and literatures of early America, despite her prominent leadership role. Weetamoo emerged as the Sonk Squaw of Pocasset after Conbitant's death, recognized by Usamiquin as his relation and true heir to the Pocasset Sogumship. In fact, the title of this book is taken from Usamiquin's description of Weetamoo as our beloved cousin and kinswoman. An influential Wampanoag diplomat, Weetamoo presented a political and cultural challenge to the Puritan men who confronted her authority. Her strategic adaptation to the colonial deed game enabled her to protect more land than nearly any surrounding leader, a history explored in Chapter 1. She married Wamsata, Usamiquin's eldest son, in a dual marriage alliance with their sister, Wutanakanoosk, and Wamsata's brother, Po Metacomet, more commonly known as Metacom or Philip. She played a key role and forged alliances during the infamous colonial conflict known as King Philip's War. One Puritan chronicler portrayed her as potent a prince as any round about her, with as much corn, land, and men at her command, as Metacom, insisting he was much more forward in the design and had greater success than King Philip himself. Yet in many histories of the war, she is relegated to a trivial role in comparison to Metacom or colonial leaders such as Plymouth Governor Josiah Winslow, Edward's son. Even recent scholarly accounts mention her briefly, a footnote to history. Weetamoo's striking presence in primary documents and her conspicuous absence from many secondary sources led me down a long winding road of
Sample complete. Ready to continue?